Seven blessings upon you, and welcome to the Waiting for Winter podcast. I'm your host, Fraser of House Robinson, joined by my co-host, Kira of House Oldfield. Say hi to the nice people, Kira.
Hi.
And this is a Game of Thrones review and recap podcast. Full disclosure, both Kira and I are unabashed book snobs, so be prepared for a great deal of whinging. At least on my part. I don't know if you feel the same way about that, Kira.
Well, I'll try and keep the whinging to a minimum.
Yeah, it's probably good to have a balance. Yeah. Also, for full disclosure, we will be probably talking full spoilers for these episodes. Admittedly, some of these first episodes are 7 years old, so if you haven't seen them by now, that's probably on you. Also, if you want to keep up with new episodes of the podcast, we have Twitter, at Winter Podcast on Twitter, and we're also on Facebook. There you can find links to the SoundCloud where this will go up. I'll hopefully also be able to get this up on iTunes. We'll see how that goes. Our hope is to review and recap 2 episodes of Game of Thrones every week until Season 8 comes out, and then do what I'm thinking is a week-by-week breakdown of each episode as it comes out. So if you're on board with that, please stick around with us until I think March of next year. So without any further ado, we'll get started on the first episode. Winter is Coming. We start on a very long opening shot of a rising gate, like a weirdly long opening shot as well. Like it's a solid 10 seconds of just watching wooden planks roll past the camera.
I think it's to impress upon the viewer of how large this is. I don't know.
it's anything's possible really with HBO. Three Night's Watch dudes, Jared, Will, and a charming gentleman named Sir Waymar Royce, ride through the wall and out into the haunted forest on patrol. While they're out there, Will finds a bunch of horrendously mutilated corpses in a snowdrift, and he wants to flee, and his other more experienced comrade Jared wants to run as well, but Sir Waymar is not afraid of anything because he's young, brash, and stupid.
R.I.P. Sir Waymar.
So they go back to the spot where the bodies were and find that they've moved. So they have a bit of a search, and Royce is very suddenly and brutally murdered by a shape with blue eyes. Jared and Will run, but this mysterious shape catches Jared and cuts his head off. And that's our cold open for this first episode, no pun intended. We immediately get the opening credits of the show.
Yeah. I must say that the opening, I think it's the best opening of credits that I've ever seen in a show. They're quite compelling.
Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, and they're very orientating as well, because sometimes you're just like, where the hell are we going?
Admittedly, though, considering some of the liberties they later take with the scale and geography in later seasons, especially in season 7, it's kind of a bad decision to open the show with a map of the universe if you're gonna
change the map of the universe.
Fudge things, yeah.
Yeah.
So immediately after the opening credits, Will is caught by a Stark patrol south of the wall, and this is sort of a point of confusion for me, because I was always a bit confused as to how Will got south of the wall without
going through Castle Black.
Yeah, and it turns out that in the books, this is not the same character from the first chapter.
No, it's Jared.
Yeah, this wasn't something I found out until recently. I didn't realise that it was a different character, who just a guy at Castle Black who, when the patrol didn't return, decided to make a break for it. So
yeah, which makes a bit more sense.
My book snobbery credentials take an immediate hit.
No, I always wondered why they did that, because that instead it's very incongruous. It's like, we should go back to the wall, and then all of a sudden he's past the wall. You're like, well, that doesn't.
I think I always imagined it was like one of those sort of cartoonish man-shaped holes that go right through the wall. Like he was so terrified he just punched right through it and kept going.
Imagine if anyone else could do that.
So we cut now to Winterfell and meet the Stark kids.
Yeah.
Bran, Robb and Jon are practicing their archery, while Arya and Sansa are doing some sewing. Ned is a good dad to Bran, when his older siblings tease him about not being good at archery.
Supportive father figure.
Yes, indeed. And sort of at the moment when it looks like Bran's about to succeed, Arya steals his thunder by sneaking out and hitting the bullseye that they're shooting for. So there's a nice little sort of family dynamic going on where we see the siblings having their sibling rivalry moment, and the parents are all sort of, oh, those kids.
Yeah, no, it's very it's kind of strange, but it's very American Family-esque in comparison to the books. Because in the books it's very like, we are Northern family, and Arya doesn't shoot kind of bows either.
Yeah, it's almost kind of Brady Bunch in a way. Like it's like it's an interesting scene, and so interrupting fun family time is Sir Roderick, the Master at Arms at Winterfell, who delivers news that the patrol has caught Will. And Ned and Kat have a bit of an argument about Bran seeing the execution, and Ned says the magic words, "Winter is coming."
That was a great accent.
So we cut now to the execution scene, and Will tells Ned what he saw, and sort of regrets not going back to Castle Black. Didn't mean that to rhyme. Then choppy happens, and I'm a bit curious why this execution block is just sitting out in the middle of nowhere.
It's for this exact purpose.
If you look at the scene, it's not just like a random tree stump. It's an actual, like headsman's block, which is...
Yeah.
It's a bit weird.
Well, I mean, like, they have the ceremonial sword and the ceremonial headsman block to execute Earthbreakers.
I never thought of it like that. I mean, it seems like a bit of an inconvenience. It's like, well, we could execute this guy just here, but we've got to
have to go and get
a third...
No, Lord Stark and get him bring the sword, and then we'll go to the block, and then we'll execute him.
So we'll execute you about a week from now. Is that all right?
Yeah. No bail, sorry.
And, there's a great little scene where Jon kind of gives Bran some I guess some encouragement.
Yeah.
Like in the form of sort of being like, you have to look at this, you have to see this, because it's an important part of your, I don't know, becoming a mature adult.
Sure.
Which is a bit weird, but you know.
Everybody needs to see a beheading to become a fully realized adult.
I know that having never seen a beheading, I'm still very into it.
That's what's wrong.
Yep, that's what's wrong with me. So Ned is once again a good dad to Bran, kind of sort of being like, do you know why I had to kill him? It's like, our way is the old way. The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword, which I think is something that both in the books as well, I think is a great sort of sentiment, like the idea of sort of justice being something that you can't delegate to other people.
Yeah, it's
something I've always appreciated it.
The punishment must be, you must be willing to do it yourself if you want to hand it down. That makes sense.
So the Starks ride home and they find that a deer and a direwolf had a throwdown. Very, 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 very grand symbolism of a stag and a direwolf having killed each other. And the Stark kids find the direwolf puppies of destiny.
Yes.
And we have that great scene of Jon kind of
looking sad, and then
and also where it was really Jon's idea to keep the puppies, because they were about to mercy kill them because their mother was dead, but Jon intervenes and insists that the direwolf puppies are symbolic because of the 5 puppies, 5 Stark children, that sort of thing, and it's an interesting moment of, I guess, a hint at some sort of connection to the magical aspect of this universe.
Yeah.
Even if it's just a subtle one.
No, I think it's what's the word I'm looking for? I'm blanking. I'm gonna go with symbolic and be very
I was gonna say auspicious.
Yeah, that's a good word.
And now we cut to King's Landing. Jon Arryn, Hand of the King, is dead, and that's all we see of Jon Arryn, just him lying in state in front of the Iron Throne. It's an odd addition to the show, where characters that are lying in state have these, like, eyes with like rocks with eyes painted on them laid over their actual eyes. It's very weird, and I don't remember any references to it in the books.
I don't remember either. I think it's there just the show's like call to there being a pantheon of gods, that sort of idea. Like it's like, oh well, this is for the gods, so we're just pointing out the fact that there are gods that we do this for, and then.
It's a stylistic choice, and it's a bit weird. I must say.
I think maybe it's just to point out that they are in fact dead.
It's like, oh, has he still got the anime eyes? Yep, he's dead.
Yeah. No, he's not just sleeping. Most certainly dead.
So, Jaime and Cersei have a sort of a cryptic conversation at the edges of the throne room where Jon Arryn is lying, which is another odd thing. Why is he lying in state in the throne room rather than in the chapel? Sept? But anyway, they have a cryptic conversation about what Jon Arryn might have known and who he might have told. So, some very heavy foreshadowing takes place in that scene.
There are secrets.
And we cut to Winterfell. The castle is preparing for the royal visit, and we have this rather, I hesitate to say, gratuitous scene of shirtless Theon, shirtless Robb, and shirtless Jon all just hanging out and having a bit of a banter. So,
and having a shave. If
there are any fans of chiseled abs in the audience, that is the scene for you.
Well, I mean, like they had to come right out of the gate and going, there's going to be nudity and it's going to be equal.
Well, I for one certainly appreciated it.
Yeah.
And so the day of the arrival comes, and Bran is climbing about on the roof, which we soon learn he is very much not allowed to do when he climbs down and runs straight into his mother, who gives him a bit of a bollocking about it. So the royals arrive. Great big procession of horses and knights and a big carriage, and there's an odd and interesting where the whole royal party arrives in the courtyard of Winterfell, and Arya some of Arya's dialogue is sort of exposition in a way. She's like, oh look, that's important character and their title.
Yeah. No, I think it was just because up to this point in the show, there's been no indication that Cersei and like who they are and who they're related to, and I feel like if they hadn't had that bit of exposition from Sansa and Arya, that we wouldn't have known that.
Yeah, it's a reasonable thing to do. It just I guess felt a little bit clumsy, but
yeah. They definitely added. I think that's definitely a thing they added afterwards, and was like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, that's just me being snobbish again. Robert, I have written here in my notes. Robert is a bit of a lad.
Yep, that describes it pretty well.
So he does this little thing with Bran where he's like, "Oh, show us your muscles," and it's very kind of very sort of Middle Ages frat bro. Which really Robert was his entire life, but
I was about to say, I feel like it's a very apt description of Robert Baratheon as Middle Ages frat boy.
So Ned and Robert go down to Winterfell's crypt, and while there, Robert offers Ned the handship, and they have a bit of a reminisce about the past, and Robert formally offers to marry Joffrey to Sansa. So that sets the whole ball rolling in that one little scene of the whole southern intrigue aspect.
Yep.
Jaime goes in search of his brother Tyrion, who is at a brothel, and we get another sort of exposition scene of Tyrion and a prostitute kind of talking in the third person about Tyrion.
Becomes a trend, I feel.
Yeah, they talk about, oh, I hear he's a stunted little imp, and it's like, he's right in front of you, Roz, Jesus.
Yeah.
Jaime comes in and sort of says to Tyrion, I don't want to be alone with these people, because there's not much love lost between the Starks and the Lannisters.
Yeah.
And Tyrion says that he's not going to go to the feast because Roz is the first of many courses, quote unquote, which is quite an insulting thing to say about someone while they're sitting in your lap, but you know.
I mean, he's guaranteeing business for the brothel for the evening. I don't think that's
fair enough. He's stimulating the local economy.
Yeah. Put some of that Lannister gold to actual good use.
Actual good use. I love that. So, back down in the crypt, Robert is mooning because in 15 years he hasn't let go of his obsession with Ned's dead sister.
Only a tiny bit creepy at this point, but...
And they sort of talk about what happened in the Baratheon rebellion when Robert became king and overthrew the Targaryens, and they have a sort of a signpost of a transition where the Targaryens are gone. Not all of them.
Yeah.
And now we cut to across the narrow sea in Pentos, where young Daenerys Targaryen is staring mournfully at the ocean. It's quite interesting seeing Dany in this season compared to having recently seen her in, sort of later seasons.
She's so small.
Yeah, she looks very young in this scene.
I mean, it's almost like you know how they've aged up from the books. She looks the age she should be in the books in this scene, I feel.
Because she's what? She's only like 13 or 14 or so in the books, I believe.
I think she's 13 when they start. Yeah, she looks 13.
So Dany's brother Viserys brings Dany her wedding dress, and cops a feel at the same time. So Targaryens
it's a Targaryen
incest.
Tradition. You must keep the family traditions alive.
You have to feel up the bride on her wedding,
especially if she's your sister.
Now, Dany, after Viserys leaves, she gets into a scalding hot bath, but apparently doesn't seem to feel the heat. So another magical plot point is dangled in front of us there.
Yep.
Although it should be noted that in the books, Dany isn't 100% immune to fire all the time. It only really happens at sort of points of magical significance. But
this is a point of magical significance. She's sad.
That's a good point. Hush my mouth, I guess.
But no, I think in the show they were just like blanket immune to hot things.
It's probably
it makes
just
it easier.
Yeah, easier from a narrative standpoint.
Yeah. So it's actually no, it's only when it's particularly magic. Just make it all the time. Yeah.
So outside the mansion where they're staying, Dany, Viserys, and their host, one Illyrio Merpatus, await the arrival of Khal Drogo, who Dany will be marrying. And I'd like to start a little segment on the show where I point out well-known actors who really are just too good to be slumming it in Game of Thrones. So I'd like to give a shout out to Roger Allam, who plays Illyrio Merpatus. Celebrated British comedy actor Roger Allam, who really is too good for this.
What is he in? What else has he been in?
Have you ever seen The Thick of It?
Yes.
Yeah, he plays one of the...
You recognises him from somewhere.
Yeah, he plays one of the opposition politicians in The Thick of It. And he's also in the Speed Racer movie. Although
I have not seen that one.
I doubt that's of less interest to most people. It's apparently garbage.
I see you don't agree.
No, I always rather liked it. It's very sort of camp and stylistic, but I think for some people it was too stylistic. Anyway, further on, Viserys and Illyrio have a bit of a scheme about what the plan is, i.e. marrying Dany to Drogo, using Drogo's enormous army to cross the Narrow Sea and reconquer the Iron Throne. And Viserys reminds Dany why they can't go back to Westeros, and continues to be a creep with that really just incredible line about letting
40,000 men
and all their horses have their way with Dany. So Viserys really not showing himself to be anything other than a bit of a weirdo.
I mean, he's inbred. You have to give him...
Well, yeah.
Sort of genetic.
Yeah. So now we cut back to Winterfell, and we have a little scene of Sansa fretting about whether or not Joffrey will like her. And, yeah.
Worry not, small one. It'll be fine.
Side eyes. And we have this sort of montage of revelry happening in Winterfell's Great Hall.
Yep.
It's a rather nice scene, actually. Everybody's sort of, having a good time, and it certainly serves to undercut some of the later just awfulness that happens to some of these people.
Yeah. Except Jon, he's left out in the show. He's not allowed. Yes, indeed. He's not allowed to be inside.
Yeah, Jon. Because in the books, Jon is allowed inside, just not at the high table.
No, I think he sits with the squires and things.
Yeah.
But no, we're here. The relationship that they portrayed in the show between Catelyn and Jon, it's far more severe, I feel.
Hang on a second.
Pardon?
Did you just say Catelyn?
I did. Catelyn.
Sorry, I've been given shit for some of my pronunciations relating to this series, so I promise I won't do that again. But
no, it's okay. No,
I just felt like calling attention to it.
No, it's alright. I've seen it written down more than I've seen it said recently.
Mm-hmm.
No,
I mean, fair enough.
It's such a severe, she hates him in the show. Whereas in the book, she's sort of just ambivalent about it. Yeah, she would rather it hadn't have happened, or hadn't have what she thought had happened, but it's here now, so we'll deal with it. Whereas in the show, she's actively hates him.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I'm not sure, in the books, do they talk about how Jon is sort of technically a threat to Robb's legitimacy as heir to Winterfell, or I seem to recall that being in there somewhere.
But it probably is. They talk about a lot of things about heirs and things, but I don't remember explicitly. My memory's not great, though.
I might be misremembering.
Okay. But yeah, no, is he, though? I mean, they know he's been claimed as a bastard at this point, so...
I think it's just a general question that hangs over all bastards, regardless of...
Yeah.
That have been sort of acknowledged. So, instead of being allowed inside at the feast, Jon is outside in the courtyard just laying into a training dummy with his sword when Ned's brother Benjen Stark arrives from Castle Black. Benjen is a man of the Night's Watch and First Ranger. Jon and Benjen have a bit of a chat about Jon possibly joining the Night's Watch. So that's that plot point set up. Benjen goes inside and Tyrion appears. And Tyrion and Jon have a bit of a chat about both being sort of outcasts. And I'd just like to repeat a quote from the book right now, which I really love. Probably one of my favourite passages from the books. It's from this scene when Tyrion goes inside to the feast after talking to Jon. When he opened the door, the light from within threw his shadow clear across the yard, and just for a moment, Tyrion Lannister stood as tall as a king.
That's good.
I absolutely adore that passage. It's really quite amazing. So, back inside, Ned and Benjen have a bit of a chat about what happened with Will, and Sansa gets introduced to Cersei.
Yep.
And Ned and Jaime have a bit of a moment where they exchange veiled threats with one another.
Our wives have told us to be nice to each other.
Yeah. Later on, Ned and Kat are in bed after what is described in the books as an intense lovemaking session, but is only really alluded to. No joke, Kat talks about how much her genitals hurt, so that's fun.
I'd forgotten about that.
Have you
forgotten about that?
Have you ever seen the Game of Thrones graphic novel?
No.
I stumbled across it. And in the scene, it's ridiculous. For starters, Ned looks like a jacked Jesus, with the hair and the beard, and also just absolutely cut. And then Kat does not look like she's had 5 children, if you catch my meaning.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So shout out to the artist for the Game of Thrones graphic novel. Although I guess it's more in line with the books than it is with the show.
Still.
So after
I found an image of Khal Drogo and Dany from the graphic novel. Holy shit.
Oh yeah, that's an interesting one. Is it the one where they're looking at each other, and he is like 7 feet tall, and she's maybe 4 feet tall. Like it's
no, he's standing behind her and like got his hands on her shoulders, and she's literally the width of his waist, and then he's about 3 times the size at the top.
Ah, yes, I know that one.
Wow. Okay, I'm gonna have to investigate that. That looks hilarious.
Yeah, it's amazing, some of the artwork in that comic. So yeah, Ned and Kat are lying in bed discussing Robert's offer, and their positions are actually reversed from in the books. Ned doesn't want the job, but Kat does want him to take the job in the books.
Yeah.
Because Kat is concerned that Robert will see it as an insult
if he doesn't go.
If Ned turns it down. But in the show, Ned
is like, my duty, and Kat, she's like, no, don't go.
I love you, and so yeah, that's an interesting sort of change from in the books.
I don't see the logic of it. Maybe it's like the same arguments would have been had if it was the other way around. I don't know. Maybe stereotypical gender roles ? I'm not sure.
I think that's actually another segment I'd like to introduce at this time. A segment called "They Did Her Dirty," which is a sequence of discussions about how various female characters have been done dirty, and in this scene, Kat was indeed done dirty. So I'd actually like to credit my the person who came up with the idea for this podcast, Olivia Nally, for that particular segment of the show. So
it's a pretty good
Olivia,
idea.
if you're listening, I'd like to take this time to acknowledge your contribution. Maester Lewin enters the room with a letter from Kat's sister Lysa Arryn accusing Cersei of murdering Jon Arryn, which we later find out was not the case.
No.
But this is another aspect of the intrigue of this of the series.
Yeah.
And we have this interesting shot of Ned staring out into the night out of the window, and behind him are framed Kat and Lewin, like sort of the angel and devil.
Yeah.
On his shoulders, because they both have differing positions on whether or not Ned should take the job.
Yeah.
And now we cut back to Pentos, and it's Dany and Drogo's wedding.
Fun times.
Illyrio and Viserys discuss the invasion of Westeros. Jorah Mormont appears for the first time and presents Dany with some books about Westeros.
Yep.
And Illyrio presents Dany with the Dragon Eggs of Destiny.
Dragon eggs from the Shadowlands.
the really probably the biggest magical MacGuffins of the series are now in play. So
there are dragons.
For those of you keeping score of the magical MacGuffins at home, that is technically number 2, but it's definitely the big one.
Yeah.
Drogo presents Dany with just a cool horse.
I mean, that horse is beautiful. You must say.
It is a beautiful horse, and a much bigger deal is made of the horse in the book.
Yeah.
Because it is very important, I think, in the Dothraki tradition that a husband present his new wife with a suitable horse.
And it's a very suitable horse.
It's made very clear that the horse is indeed more than suitable. So Dany and Drogo ride off and have a very uncomfortable sexual encounter by the sea.
Yeah.
And now we're going to have a second instance of they did. Well, them dirty in this case. Both Dany and Drogo, their relationship in the show is a lot less.
It's a lot more rapey.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's not as I guess not as loving, at least in the beginning, as it is.
Yeah, I mean, like in the show, in the book, it was definitely like she didn't want to, but it wasn't an entirely unpleasant experience.
Yeah, as I recall. That first time was a bit sort of less overtly unpleasant for Dany, which is so they did them dirty. We cut back to Winterfell now. Ned and Robert go off hunting, despite Ned not really wanting to, but Robert's the king. What are you gonna do?
Lads.
Pretty much. Bran decides to go for a bit of a climb on the old keep of Winterfell and stumbles on Jaime and Cersei banging it out. Which, dun dun dun.
Catalyst for many things.
And so Jaime sort of makes it look like he's not going to be too mad about it, and then he is mad about it and throws Bran out the window.
I love how they checked. Bran, like he checked. He's like, "How old are you? Okay, you understand what we were doing. Now you go out the window."
Yep. It's like, we were just wrestling. Oh, you know that's a lie? Alright, death time.
Yeah, out you go.
And so Bran falls to earth and we roll credits on the first episode. So we've now got all the major sort of plot points rolling, the intrigue, the mundane side and the magical side both now in play.
The dragons.
A very strong first episode, Game of Thrones, actually.
Yeah, no, it's very compelling. It tells you lots of things, like this will be coming and this will be interesting in the future. It's a good first episode of a show. It does its job.
I think definitely one of the better ones.
Yeah.
With all that HBO money behind it.
Yep.
So now we move on to the second episode we're going to be discussing. Episode 2 of Season 1, The Kingsroad. We open on the Dothraki Sea. Drogo's Khalasar is on the move. Dany and Jorah have a bit of a chat about Dothraki culture, including the legend of the ghost grass, which I think is probably one of my favourite sort of mythological aspects of this universe. This legend that one day this ghost grass will cover the entire world, and that's how the world will end. And it's just kind of cool, and I rather like it. So shout out to whoever came up with that. George R.R. Martin, presumably. The Khalasar makes camp for the night, and Jorah and Viserys have a bit of a conversation about why Jorah had to leave Westeros. Namely that he was caught selling slaves to pay for his expensive wife, and that Ned Stark was about to come and bring the hammer down, take him to the special execution block with the special sword.
The ceremonial execution block with the ceremonial sword?
Not just for Night's Watch deserters anymore.
Aww.
We cut to Winterfell, and Tyrion wakes up hungover in the kennels. We have this sort of funny scene of Tyrion sort of lying unconscious on the straw and a dog licking his face, which is very sort of... I think that's very common shorthand for person is waking up from a hangover.
Yeah, it's a good shorthand. I think it works well.
Joffrey shows up, and Tyrion and Joffrey have a bit of a chat about etiquette, and we get the iconic triple slap.
Oh, yeah.
Where Tyrion gives Joffrey once with the front, once with the back, once again with the front, and it's...
What else is the point of a bitch slap apart from to turn your hand around so you can do it again? Intensely
satisfying. So very early on, we immediately get some comeuppance for Joffrey and his
the only one for a very long time, I feel.
Unrelenting dickishness. Tyrion goes to the...
Hold on that memory in dark times.
Yeah. So Tyrion goes to the dining hall where his siblings and Tommen and Marcella are having breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
They have a bit of a chat about Bran's condition, and sort of Jaime and Cersei express their concern that Bran might wake up, but they sort of guise it as, it wouldn't be much of a life being crippled, because he probably is crippled.
Yeah.
He should probably be better for him if he dies, and Tyrion is clearly not buying their concern.
No.
And can sort of very clearly see that they don't want Bran to wake up for reasons of their own. Do you think Tyrion ever knew about what was happening with Jaime and Cersei?
I think he figured it out.
Yeah, I think he had to have known in some capacity.
Because he was around when they started doing it as teenagers.
Mm.
And they would have been much worse at hiding it then, I feel. So I think
he's only about 5 years younger.
Yeah.
Than them. So I mean, and he's not.
Would have been what, 11?
Yeah, thereabouts. In Bran's room, Cat is standing vigil over Bran. Cersei comes in, and they have a bit of a chat about motherhood. And Cersei
Make up a child.
Yeah. Cersei mentions Yeah, that first child that she and Robert had that didn't survive, which doesn't actually work with the timeline of either the show or the books, I think.
Yeah, no, because it's a fabrication of the show. That
doesn't
they had
actually
a child
work
at
in the
all.
timeline of the show, I think.
No, I don't think it does.
Yeah, maybe? I imagine we might have to publish a retraction about that.
Draw it out and find a timeline. but no, because in the books it was definitely like she'd gotten pregnant by Rob, but she had an abortion.
Yeah, and when
that happened.
It very much becomes a part of her character that she would do everything that she could to avoid getting pregnant. By Robert rather than Jamie. The other thing in this scene is that Kat is in the process of making some sort of weird dreamcatcher thing that never gets mentioned until season 3.
Yeah.
Like that never gets talked about or brought up again until 2 seasons down the line. So great storytelling, really.
You remember this thing that we saw for a grand total of maybe 10 seconds at the second episode of the show? No pity.
Well, here it is again. And in the Castle Forge, Jamie and John have a bit of a chat about duty, because it's now sort of common knowledge that John is planning on joining the Night's Watch. Jamie does a Trump-style handshake on John. He grabs his hand and pulls it in close, like it's...
Yeah.
I just thought it was funny. Arya is in her room packing for King's Landing. John comes in and gives her a sword that he had Winterfell's blacksmith Mikken make, and Arya names it Needle. And so this is a very, very sort of a very important moment in Arya's character development. Like, Sansa has her needles, I have mine, and this is a big moment for Arya.
Yeah.
So Arya and John have a bit of a tender moment, and then John goes to say goodbye to Bran, which upsets Kat. And again, we have what we talked about before, that kind of overt hostility that Kat has toward John.
Yeah, which is, because of the way they portrayed that relationship, I'm really surprised that they didn't put in... Because in the books, she asks John to leave, whereas here she didn't, and I thought that part would have fit with the way that they were doing this character, or the relationship between these two characters in the show. So, I don't know, maybe there just wasn't time, but...
Yeah.
It would have made sense for her to ask him to leave now as well.
Because in that scene, she does, she says, I want you to go, but it's sort of more intended as she wants him to leave the room rather than to leave the castle, so I don't know that we can really count that.
Yeah.
Out in the castle yard, Rob and John have a tender goodbye moment as well. Next time I see you, you'll be all in black, says Rob, which is, unfortunate because they will never see each other again.
Yeah.
Just in case you were thinking about having, just in case you were thinking about forgetting that everything ends horribly, this is your friendly reminder that everything ends horribly. Then out on the Kingsroad, John, Benjen and Tyrion turn to go north, while Ned, Robert and the Royals all turn south. Ned promises to tell John about his mother when they next meet, and this is another scene where these two characters will never see each other again.
Because everything ends horribly.
Yes, indeed. The dramatic irony, even though we didn't know it at the time, is very strong.
Yeah.
So further down the road, Ned and Robert stop for lunch, and they have a bit of a reminisce again about the old days, including John's mother, which Ned drops a name, Wyler, who was in the canon John's actual nursemaid.
Yeah.
And one of the many names that Ned has kind of encouraged people to think might be John's mother, to draw attention away from the truth.
Yeah. Spoilers, she's not his mother.
Yeah. Robert shows Ned a message that's come from King's Landing about Dany and her wedding to Drogo, and they have a disagreement about assassinating Dany. And there's this weird comment that Robert makes that a war is coming, which I don't know, seems a bit odd.
It seems a bit preemptuous.
Yeah, like the tension between the Starks and the Lannisters at this point, like it's not to the point where it's going to be a war, definitely. So it's weird. In the books, they talk about how Westeros would be impossible to conquer while Robert's alive because he has such a strong hold on power and strong alliances.
Yeah.
So I don't see why Robert would think that there's such a big threat to the kingdom at that point, but I don't know. So now we cut to the Dothraki Sea and we get this rather uncomfortable scene of Drogo raping Dany.
Yep.
Which again is, it's not as removed from the book portrayal of their relationship, but it's still a bit sort of...
It's a bit intense, I feel.
A bit harsh,
yeah, it doesn't need to be that intense.
There's a great story from the production of this scene, actually, of Jason Momoa, who plays Khal Drogo, coming onto set wearing a sock puppet on his penis, and they had to take a 10-minute break because Emilia Clarke couldn't stop laughing. So
that's great. That's fantastic.
In case you were worried about that scene being a bit too grim, there was a bit of levity happening in the background.
Yeah.
And sort of while this is happening in the context of the scene, Dany has a bit of a premonition about the dragons.
Yep.
And now we cut back to the north. The group heading for the wall have stopped for the night. Tyrion taunts Jon about the criminals that join the Night's Watch, because at some point they picked up some criminals that are being sent up to the wall as punishment. And Tyrion talks about why he reads so much. And we have another great quote: "A mind needs books like a sword needs a whetstone."
It is an appropriate exposition of his character. I can't do swords, so I do books.
Yeah, I think it's quite cool. I rather like it.
I still don't know why they couldn't just give him a small sword. Like, if he's so into swords, just give him a small sword.
So we cut back to Winterfell. Cat is still watching over Bran, and Maester Luwin comes in and reminds Cat that there are still things that need to be done around the castle. Robb comes in and says, I'll take care of them, which is a nice little moment of Robb sort of stepping up and taking responsibility for things. Robb gets called away because a fire has broken out elsewhere in the castle, and while Robb is away, some guy comes in and tries to murder Bran.
Some guy.
When he wasn't expecting to find Cat there, but nevertheless goes for it anyway, and Cat gets very, very badly injured. She's got these big cuts on her hands.
Yep.
And at that point, it looks like she's about to lose, and she and Bran are going to die, when the direwolf, Bran's direwolf, Summer, comes just flying out of nowhere and absolutely brutalizes this guy. Like, it is messy. There's just arterial blood and everything, and
the throat is
then
removed from the man.
That is one way of putting it, yes. And then right as soon as everything's done, Summer just hops back up onto Bran's bed like nothing ever really happened. So that's a fun scene, definitely.
Yeah.
And we cut back to the Dothraki Sea. Dany asks her handmaids about dragons. Dorea, the one non-Dothraki handmaiden that Dany has, tells Dany the myth of the Dragon Egg Moon, that the Planetos used to have 2 moons until one of them got too close to the sun, and the dragons broke out of it because it was actually a giant egg, and they drank the sun's fire, and that's why dragons breathe fire.
Yep.
It's
thousands of dragons.
I'm not sure that it appears in the books, to the best of my recollection.
I honestly couldn't tell you, but I don't remember it happening.
Recalling that wrong, but it's another interesting sort of mythology that appears in the show, and it's another one that I think is quite cool.
Yeah.
And in that same scene, Dany asks Dorea to teach her how to please Drogo. Please, yeah. in nice big quotation marks there. We cut back to the north. Jon, Tyrion and Benjen arrive at the wall, and this is the first time as an audience that we see the wall in its full scale, like this
big.
Gigantic piece of architecture.
Although I feel like they could have employed elevators in other places. But no.
There's just this one place.
Yep.
And we cut back to Winterfell. Kat investigates the spot where Bran fell and finds a strand of golden hair, which I choose to believe is one of Jaime's pubes.
There's nothing saying it wasn't.
It's entirely my headcanon. So Kat calls Robb, Theon, Lewin and Sir Roderick to the Godswood, where she presents her theory that Bran was thrown from the tower, possibly by a Lannister, and she resolves to go to King's Landing incognito and present Ned with her findings.
I mean, like, she could totally just catch up with them, but okay.
Yeah, it's odd that they don't. That this is also sort of in the books as well, that Kat doesn't manage to catch up with the royal party, because I would imagine they'd be moving a lot slower.
I mean, there's like 100 of them, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a lot of people. But
and then
anyway.
they go through all like the bullshit that's just about to come, and there's just lots of delays. I feel like if she'd hustled, it would have been alright.
And also, I think if I recall correctly in the books, they go by ship. They ride from Winterfell down to White Harbour and then take a ship from White Harbour to King's Landing.
Yes.
So, yeah, don't know what that was about. Anyway, we cut back to the Dothraki Sea, and Dany is getting lessons from Doreah. We get this very sort of intense scene of the two of them kind of practicing on each other.
Yeah.
And later, Dany puts Doreah's teachings to the test on Drogo, and it seems to
work.
And we do start to get this more sort of loving aspect of their relationship coming into it.
Yeah.
At long last. And now we cut to Darry in the Riverlands, a castle where the royal procession is encamped for the night. Sansa is wandering around the camp, trying and failing to make friends with the other women, when she has a rather uncomfortable encounter with Sir Ilan Payne and the Hound, from which Joffrey rescues her in one of his few moments of being nice to people, which is immediately ruined by the next scene.
Oh yeah.
The
thing about Joffrey is that like he looks like a shit while he's being nice to him, like nice to people, even at this point in the show. Like, yeah. I'm probably super biased by the rest of the events, but even now you look at him and you're like, I hate you.
No, I think shout out to Jack Gleeson for just being so good at selling this nice but still being a dick routine that he does for quite a bit of his performance as Joffrey.
Yeah.
So down by the Trident, Arya is practicing sword fighting with a peasant boy called Micah. Joffrey and Sansa come along. Joffrey having just offered alcohol to a minor. In this case, Sansa.
Aren't they both minors? Isn't Joffrey a minor?
Yeah, Joffrey is indeed a minor. But,
is there a concept of minors in this universe?
I think there is technically, but not when it comes to the distribution of alcohol.
No.
So yeah, Sansa and Joffrey come across Arya and Micah having their practice fighting. And while they're watching, Micah manages to sort of hit Arya, which Joffrey takes umbrage with. Like, I really don't know what's going through his mind in this scene. I think
he was just wanting to be a dick.
Because I think there was some aspect of like he wants to sort of impress Sansa or something, but
impress Sansa and insert himself into other people's business and. Yeah, just generally being annoying.
Yeah. Joffrey threatens Micah with his sword because he's like, well, you struck my lady's sister and you're just a peasant boy. And at which point Arya...
He cuts him, doesn't he?
Yeah, he cuts him. He cuts his cheek a little bit, at which point Arya sort of attacks Joffrey with the piece of wood she's been using as a practice sword. And, Joffrey's about to go hard out on her when... Out of the blue, in a parallel to the earlier scene, Arya's direwolf Nymeria comes flying in and just rips into Joffrey.
Direwolves for MVP this episode, I feel.
Oh, absolutely! Another great scene of catharsis for watching Joffrey suffer. And to add insult to injury, Arya throws Joffrey's sword in the river. So that's a resounding and triumphant fuck you to Joffrey
Which is immediately dismantled.
So Arya and Nymeria hide from search parties, and Arya realizes that she has to drive Nymeria off so she doesn't get killed. And this scene, it
makes me so sad.
Absolutely heartbreaking that she has to sort of send away her beloved pet, which is, yeah, it's a shame.
We see her again, right? We do?
In season 7,
yeah.
Nymeria makes another appearance, but, we'll get to that. The search for Arya continues into the night, and Ned's getting more and more frantic, like the great dad that he is. Jory Cassell catches
protective
up to
father
him.
figure.
Yeah. Jory catches up to him and tells him that Arya has been found and brought straight to Robert by some of Cersei's men, which, sends Ned into an absolute panic.
Yep.
In the Great Hall of Castle Darry, Joffrey lies about what happened by the river, which Arya disputes in the strongest possible terms. And
for a small child.
Yeah, Cersei brings out Sansa, who denies knowing anything about what happened, and Arya lashes out at her. Robert just says, you know what, Ned, you sort out your children, I'll sort out mine, we'll call it quits. But Cersei insists that Sansa's direwolf lady be put to death in place of Nymeria.
Which also solidifies Cersei as a bitch.
Which, it drives a bit of a wedge between Ned and Robert, because Ned kind of appeals to Robert to overrule Cersei, but Robert decides not to. And so, Ned decides that, alright, well then I'll do the job myself, because I don't want some butcher like Sir Ilan Payne just making a mess of it. I'm going to do it myself.
Yeah.
And just as a sort of, as an audience member's perspective, you can see the moment when Arya decides that she wants to kill Cersei and Joffrey. If you watch Arya's face in that scene, it's just intensely expressive. So, shout out to 11-year-old Maisie Williams for some really incredible facial acting right there. Outside the castle, Ned meets the Hound, who has the corpse of Arya's friend Micah. So it's a real downer note, in what becomes an even further downer note.
Yep.
We cut briefly to Winterfell, and Bran's direwolf Summer can sense that something is wrong. We cut back to Darry. Ned does the deed, and it's again very, very brutal. Like just the little noise of the direwolf is just and then we cut back to Winterfell, and Bran wakes up.
Yep.
And that's roll credits for the episode.
The way they cut it definitely seems like the killing of the direwolf was what woke Bran up, which is certainly not a thing, but
I guess it's as good a way as any to sort of hint to the magical connection that exists between the children and the direwolves. So, any final thoughts before we wrap up, Kira?
Don't think so. I think just overall it's a really good start, just from a general TV perspective. It's a really good start to a series, and it's already, you basically already know who you're gonna hate, which is good character development.
It lays things out very well for us.
Yeah, it does. I had a point, but I've forgotten. So if you have any points, I'll try to remember my point.
All right. I just wanted to agree that it's a very good start to the season. We've got our magical and mundane plots cooking away, and it's interesting to see where things go from here.
Oh, right, I remember my point. It's interesting, they do show it in the show quite well, that there's a difference between Cersei's men and the men and Ned's men. Not Ned's men. Help me out. King, Bearman. Robert's men, yes.
There we go.
Yeah, so I was thinking Rob, but no, that's the small Stark. No, it's the actual, still this Robert. That they definitely don't portray them as a team.
Yeah.
They definitely show them that this is the Lannisters and this is the Baratheon, and they're still completely separate.
Cersei's got her own cadre.
Yeah.
Anyway, until next time, we will be reviewing episodes 3 and 4 of season 1.
Yep.
And until then, I am Fraser of House Robinson.
And I'm Kira of House Oldfield.
Actually,
the name fits really well, actually.
Yeah, actually,
I have a very weird name.
Fun fact, there's actually a House Oldflowers in the books that I just thought that was interesting. Anyway, find us on Facebook and Twitter at Winter Podcast on both platforms, and until next time, watch out for direwolves, I guess.